gripping scene unfolds at the entrance of a hospital as a black doctor is halted by security, while the entire surgical team inside eagerly anticipates her guidance. What unfolds when her leadership is challenged at the pivotal point of her professional journey? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments section below. Dr. Olivia Bennett hurried forward, her sneakers echoing against the smooth tile surface of the hospital parking garage. The message she received was straightforward. Critical condition, patient requires emergency surgery. This was familiar territory for her. This was her existence, rescuing others, taking the lead, ensuring that all was in order even when chaos reigned. As she neared the hospital's entrance, her concentration was abruptly disrupted by a reaching hand. "Excuse me, miss." A commanding voice resonated. Her feet came to a stop mere inches from the door. A sentinel of safety. A towering figure with broad shoulders, adorned with a badge that bore the letter D. Reynolds obstructed her path. His position was resolute, his face a mask of mystery. Olivia's heart was pounding, but now for a completely new cause. She blinked slowly. "Is there an issue?" Her voice remained composed, yet she was acutely aware of the direction this was heading. Reynolds' gaze swept across her, taking in the navy blue scrubs, the hospital ID badge hanging from her coat pocket, and the assured stance of a woman who had navigated these corridors for years. And yet, his lips curled ever so slightly, his stance unwavering and resolute. "Visiting hours are over," he stated, remaining completely still. Olivia let out a sharp breath, sensing the frustration beginning to take hold. "I am employed here. I am Dr. Bennett, the lead in cardiothoracic surgery. I must enter immediately." The guard's eyebrows arched subtly, as though he was processing something that felt a bit off. His gaze lingered on her ID, yet rather than moving aside, he paused. "It seems we haven't crossed paths until now." She clenched her ID firmly. "This isn't something I can prioritize right now. A patient is awaiting my attention in the operating room." She attempted to sidestep him, yet Reynolds adjusted his position, obstructing her way once more. "Wait a moment. I must confirm this. What needs verification?" Olivia's frustration boiled over, the pressing nature of the moment draining her composure. "My name is prominently displayed, along with my image and my designation. What specific information do you require for verification?" Reynolds straightened his posture. "We have established guidelines." Olivia took a deep breath, striving to maintain her composure, determined not to reveal how maddeningly reminiscent this moment felt. "Could you clarify which protocols you are referring to? Are those the ones that pertain solely to me?" Reynolds' jaw clenched. "I'm simply fulfilling my responsibilities." Her anger surged. There it stood, the expression, the all-encompassing justification. She felt an urge to shout, to question why his role appeared to revolve around hindering her, while the other doctors passed by effortlessly, offering nothing more than a fleeting look. She surveyed her surroundings, searching for a potential witness, someone who could lend their voice, but the entrance remained silent, punctuated only by the steady beeping of the hospital's automatic doors. Behind the glass, she observed nurses hurrying about, the orchestrated frenzy of an emergency unfolding before her eyes. The surgical team, comprising Dr. Alan Park, Dr. Simone Carter, and Dr. Ethan Morrison, gathered near the reception desk, their expressions taut, eyes scanning the area for her presence. Then Alan caught sight of her. His brows knitted together in perplexity as he rapped on the glass, urging her to quicken her pace. "Dr. Bennett, we require your presence immediately," he shouted through the glass doors. Reynolds tilted his head ever so slightly, yet remained still. Olivia seized the opportunity to maneuver around him and advance, her tone cutting with command. "Step aside, please." Reynolds' hand moved instinctively toward his radio, but just as he was about to speak, the glass doors glided open and Alan emerged. "Dr. Bennett, what's causing the delay?" Alan inquired, his tone sharp with worry. Reynolds began to speak, but Alan cut him off before he could finish. His hand darted forward, pointing at Olivia. "She is the chief surgeon handling a critical emergency situation. What on earth are you up to?" For a brief moment, Reynolds' expression contorted. He gazed at Olivia, then at Alan, and finally at the ID badge he had already scrutinized. Something within him appeared to shift, and he took a half-step back, his lips forming a tight line. He murmured, just verifying. Alan let out a derisive laugh, his frustration evident. Next time, make sure to check more quickly. This is not the moment for such matters. Olivia swiftly moved on, not pausing to listen for any further words. She charged ahead, bursting through the hospital doors, her heart racing in her ears. Upon entering, a nurse immediately handed her a surgical report. The patient is ready for the procedure. We're eagerly anticipating your arrival, Dr. Bennett. She nodded, absorbing the details, activating a mental switch. Precision mode. She had no time to linger on the recent events. Not at this moment. Not when a life hung in the balance. Let's go, she said, already making her way to the operating room. Yet, as she donned her gloves and readied herself for the task ahead, that moment continued to hover just beyond her thoughts. The obstruction. It lacked novelty, it offered no shock, and therein lay the greatest disappointment. Yet when it occurred again, she felt uncertain about her ability to simply turn and leave. The operating room lay in hushed stillness, punctuated only by the unwavering beep of the monitors and the measured breaths of the patient, who lay unmoving on the table. Olivia Bennett had performed this countless times. The initial cut, the intricate dance of a blade, the delicate balance of accuracy and immediacy. Yet this evening, an unfamiliar energy surged through her veins. The exasperation, the disgrace, the disruption. Her hands glided with familiar grace, yet her thoughts lingered on the unfolding scene beyond those doors. The manner in which Reynolds had gazed at her, the way uncertainty hung in his tone. She had suppressed it, compelled herself to focus on the task at hand. Yet as she led her team through the complex process, the burden of it bore heavily against her chest. Dr. Bennett, the heart rate is stabilizing, Dr. Park declared. She nodded, her tone steady, composed, effective. We're progressing to the next stage, suction. Dr. Carter meticulously adjusted the instruments, while the scrub nurse deftly provided Olivia with precisely what she required. The team operated seamlessly, carrying out every task with meticulous accuracy. For a fleeting instant, she found herself on the brink of oblivion. Nearly. In that moment, realization dawned upon her. Had she arrived later, had she lingered outside for just 5 more minutes in that argument, this patient might not have survived. The revelation tightened her hold on the forceps, causing the atmosphere to thicken around her. We're wrapping things up, she finally declared, moving ahead. The last stitches were secured. The operation went smoothly. A life has been preserved. And yet, Olivia had never experienced such intense fury. As she removed her gloves and took a step back from the table, the rush of adrenaline started to fade away. The fatigue settled in, yet her weariness extended beyond the physical realm. She felt a weariness that permeated her very being. Dr. Morrison gave her a supportive pat on the back as they stepped out of the operating room. Yet another extraordinary event recorded. Doctor. She offered a slight nod, yet her expression lacked the typical contentment that followed a successful procedure. Morrison scowled. Is everything all right? She let out a long, measured breath. Not quite. The gravity of the recent events beyond those doors, the ease with which her authority had been challenged, and the unsettling familiarity of being halted in such a manner began to sink in. The surgical team had witnessed it as well. Alan's sharp retort directed at Reynolds was striking. The manner in which the nurses shared glances. No need to say it, Morrison murmured as they strolled toward the lounge. I do, Olivia retorted, massaging her temples. If I don't take action, it will remain stagnant, and I'm weary of allowing things to linger. Morrison paused, contemplating his next words. Are you looking to submit a complaint? Olivia emitted a dry, humorless laugh. And express what exactly? Can you believe that a security guard doubted a black woman's capability to be a surgeon? Did he really hinder my progress during a crucial moment in life or love? So what comes next? A heartfelt expression of regret? A commitment to enhanced training? What about the week after this one? Another black doctor faces the same situation, and we find ourselves back at square one. Even she was taken aback by the sharpness in her tone. Morrison gave a curt nod, his jaw clenched. I understand. However, that doesn't imply it's correct. When it occurs constantly, the concept of right loses its significance. She yearned to dismiss the conversation, release it, and forge ahead. As she rounded the corner into the break room, she suddenly stopped short. Reynolds was present. He had company. He stood rigidly, arms folded, confronting Alan, who appeared as though he had just emerged from a fierce argument. Alan glanced over and saw Olivia, a wave of relief washing over his features. "Dr. Bennett," he called, waving for her to approach. Reynolds' gaze briefly locked with hers, but he swiftly averted his eyes. Olivia took a deep breath, steadying her pace as she drew closer. "I was just clarifying to our companion that preventing the lead surgeon from accessing her own hospital in the midst of an emergency is far beyond a mere error," Alan remarked, his tone laced with irony. Reynolds' jaw tightened. "I adhered to the established guidelines." "Whose guidelines?" Olivia interjected, her tone unsettlingly serene. Reynolds adjusted his position, a hint of unease evident in his demeanor. "You were unrecognizable to me. There have been occurrences in the past. Individuals attempting to infiltrate, masquerading as personnel." She crossed her arms. "I wasn't being stealthy. I had my identification ready. I had on my scrubs. I was just stepping into my hospital." A prolonged, charged stillness enveloped the room. Reynolds let out a deep breath and massaged the nape of his neck. "I assure you, Dr. Bennett, my intention was never to show any disrespect." Olivia's face remained unchanged. "However, you did show me a lack of respect." Reynolds paused, caught in a moment of uncertainty. I understand that now. I ought to have. You ought to have completed your task properly," she interrupted, her tone cutting through the air. "While you were pondering my place in this setting, a life was slipping away. A glimmer of an idea, regret, awakening, glanced across Reynolds' face. However, Olivia had no interest in the feeble justification he was concocting. "I believe you might think this has come to an end." The phrase "I didn't mean it" speaks volumes. However, it isn't. I have dedicated years to working diligently to prove my competence for this title. And yet, this evening, none of that held significance. Those are not my qualifications. This isn't my role. It wasn't the reality that individuals within this hospital were anticipating my intervention to rescue a life. Her voice remained calm, yet her hands clenched into tight fists at her sides. "You halted my progress because, in your perception, I didn't fit the image you had in mind. And that almost resulted in a life being lost." Reynolds gulped nervously. After a period of silence, Alan finally broke his quietude. "What's the matter? Speak to me, Officer Reynolds. If she had been a white man in a lab coat, would you have intervened?" Reynolds remained silent. That was sufficient response. Olivia chuckled softly, shaking her head in amusement. "Indeed, that aligns with my thoughts." With a swift motion, she pivoted and walked away, leaving him behind. Morrison trailed behind her, matching her stride. "You're doing well." "Not even in the ballpark," she whispered. She found herself torn between the sources of her frustration, whether it was the occurrence itself or her anticipation of it unfolding. And she felt, deep within, that it was far from finished. Not at this moment. Olivia turned her back on Reynolds. Yet the blaze within her heart would not be extinguished. The hospital buzzed with a flurry of activity surrounding her. Nurses darting from one room to another. Medical professionals reviewing data. A familiar blend of order and disorder. Yet her thoughts were ensnared in a repetitive cycle. This wasn't the first instance of her being scrutinized in a space that felt like home. And she questioned whether it would be the final one. She arrived at the staff locker room and swung the door open with an excess of vigor. The fluorescent lights hummed gently, creating stark shadows that danced across the lines of lockers. She required a moment to inhale deeply, to allow the tightness in her body to release before she lashed out at the wrong individual. As she rounded the corner, she spotted Simone Carter casually leaning against a locker, arms crossed in a relaxed manner. She remained in her scrubs, her curly hair secured in a neat bun. Before Olivia could utter a word, Simone interjected, "I heard." Olivia let out a weary breath, massaging her temples. "Naturally, you did." Simone leaned away from the locker, her head tilting thoughtfully. Alan was on the brink of unleashing a torrent of words at that man in the lobby. Morrison appeared as though he was on the verge of hurling a chair. Olivia let out a chuckle, shaking her head in disbelief. "What about you?" "Oh, I'm prepared to set the entire place ablaze." Simone's voice carried a serene quality, yet Olivia, familiar with her nuances, could detect the anger bubbling just below the calm exterior. "Are you all right?" Olivia conceded. "I am not." Simone nodded, her expression suggesting that she had anticipated that response. "What shall we do in response to this?" Olivia exhaled deeply and settled onto the bench, propping her elbows on her knees.
"I'm uncertain, Simone."
Submitting a complaint seems futile. I have observed these diversity training sessions. Everything remains the same. Once more, it will unfold next week. Simone took a seat next to her. Perhaps, but perhaps it won't occur here again. Perhaps it won't occur for the next black physician who enters those doors. Olivia took a deep breath. That was the issue, wasn't it? The pressure of being the one to voice concerns, to shoulder that responsibility alongside all the other challenges. She had put in so much effort to be turned away at the entrance of her own hospital as if she were an outsider. Just as she was about to speak again, the door burst open. Alan and Morrison entered, their expressions mirroring the tension that enveloped her. "Have you had a conversation with him?" Morrison inquired, his tone sharp. Olivia gave a slight nod, though it was hardly convincing. Alan raked his fingers through his hair, letting out a sharp breath. That individual poses a risk. He was completely unaware of his actions. Or perhaps he did, and it simply didn't matter to him. Morrison folded his arms across his chest. "In any case, it simply cannot be tolerated. This cannot be overlooked, Olivia." She cast her gaze upon them. They felt a deep sense of anger on her behalf. That held significance. Consistently has. Simone leaned in, her voice now a gentle whisper. "This is not something we simply overlook." Olivia gazed at her hands. The very hands that had preserved a life this evening. The very hands that had been stopped by a gatekeeper who doubted her place. A resolution found its place within her heart. "I've made up my mind. I'm going to report him," she declared at last. "It's not solely about him. The entire framework that enables this to persist. If I don't, I'm just like those who turn a blind eye." Alan gave a slight nod. "Excellent. I'll support you," Simone said without hesitation. "Everyone will." Morrison wore a sly grin. "It seems Alan has already ignited some chaos in the break room, so we're all part of the action now." Olivia couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. The irritation lingered on. The fatigue lingered heavily within her bones. Yet, she sensed something different now. Resolve. She rose, easing the tension in her shoulders. "Very well, let's stir the pot a bit." They exited the locker room side by side, their steps perfectly synchronized. This went beyond just the events of tonight. It extended beyond her alone. It revolved around each and every one of them. She stood her ground unwavering. The administrative office of the hospital felt chillier than Olivia recalled. It's not about the temperature. It's about the sensation, the barrenness of the environment. The framed mission statement on the wall, brimming with terms like inclusion and equity, seemed to mock her. She positioned herself opposite Dr. Patel, the chief medical officer of the hospital, while Alan, Simone, and Morrison stood beside her, forming a protective barrier. Across the room, Reynolds sat rigidly, his arms folded, his expression meticulously neutral. Dr. Patel clasped her hands in front of her. "Dr. Bennett, I see you wish to discuss the incident that took place last night in a formal manner." Olivia acted without a moment's pause. "Absolutely." Mr. Reynolds, the security guard, prevented me from entering the hospital as I was heading to perform emergency surgery. Even though I had my ID on, introduced myself, and was dressed in complete surgical scrubs, I faced delays under the guise of needing verification. At that moment, my surgical team, my patient, and the entire operating room were all depending on me. Dr. Patel shifted her gaze to Reynolds, her face a mask of ambiguity. Officer Reynolds, what are your thoughts on this matter? Reynolds leaned in, his tone unwavering. I adhered to the established guidelines. There have been occurrences of individuals without proper authorization attempting to enter restricted areas. I was simply fulfilling my responsibilities. Olivia's jaw tightened. There it stood. Once more. She took a deep breath before she began to speak. And yet, those protocols never appear to be enforced for my white colleagues. Do they? Reynolds recoiled slightly, just enough to be noticeable. Olivia pressed on. Let's clarify things. You allowed me to proceed due to the established guidelines. You halted my progress because, upon seeing me, a black woman in scrubs, you failed to recognize a surgeon. You encountered an individual you felt compelled to investigate, a person you required to interrogate. The atmosphere was still. Alan leaned in, his tone cutting through the air. Do you recall what I did when I entered last night? I presented my badge and stepped through the threshold. No one intervened. Not a single time. Simone gave a slight nod. I feel the same way. Not one question. And I wasn't even dressed for the occasion. Morrison released a dry, humorless laugh. I entered just as Olivia was still in the midst of her argument with him. And can you believe it? He didn't even glance in my direction. Dr. Patel's eyes darted back and forth between them. She let out a weary breath. Dr. Bennett, I completely understand your frustration. And I don't doubt that situations like this can evoke, Olivia interjected, interrupting her. This is not an emotion. It is the truth of existence. These are undeniable truths. Poses a significant risk. She let out a quick breath, leaning in closer. With each passing second I remained outside, the risk to my patient grew. If I had arrived just 5 minutes later, their lives could have been lost. And for what purpose? Is there an unfounded doubt? Dr. Patel moved. This is a matter of great importance, and I want to assure you that we approach these issues with the utmost seriousness. A review of security procedures will be conducted. Olivia tilted her head, her eyes narrowing with a hint of intrigue. What do you think about it? Reynolds finally broke the silence once more. I see it clearly now that he took a moment, then exhaled deeply. I wish I had approached things in another way. Olivia released a brief, sardonic chuckle. In a different manner? She rose, pressing both hands firmly against the table. Are you aware of the peril your indecision posed? What a folly it is to place oneself in the way of a surgeon and a patient due to personal prejudices. Reynolds averted his gaze. Dr. Patel adjusted her posture, preparing to speak. Dr. Bennett, could you clarify what you are requesting? Olivia adjusted her posture. Responsibility. Genuine responsibility. Dr. Patel acknowledged with a deliberate nod. This indicates that Olivia acted without a moment's pause. Compulsory training on racial bias for security personnel. Authentic preparation. More than merely a presentation in a formal format. An in-depth examination of the recruitment and training methods employed for our security personnel. I demand a public statement from this hospital recognizing that what occurred was entirely unacceptable. Alan, Simone, and Morrison shared a knowing look before affirmatively nodding together. Dr. Patel drummed her fingers on the desk, letting out a sigh. That's quite substantial. Olivia's lips sealed tightly. It feels like being an unwelcome guest in a space that should feel like home. A prolonged hush lingered in the air between them. Dr. Patel reclined, her fingers massaging her temples. At last she gave a nod. We shall proceed with it. Reynolds appeared ready to voice his dissent, yet he remained silent. Olivia let out a breath, feeling the tightness in her shoulders ease away. Only a small amount. Fell short of being complete. It wouldn't solve all the problems. Yet it marked the beginning. As they exited the office, Simone nudged her shoulder. You've accomplished it. Olivia dismissed the idea with a shake of her head. Absolutely not. We accomplished that. Morrison smiled broadly. Regardless of the circumstances, I'm treating everyone to drinks this evening. Alan wore a sly grin. Absolutely, you are. After what felt like an eternity, a smile finally graced Olivia's face. This was more than a mere triumph for her. A transformation occurred, and she would ensure it endured.